In the 1920s, a German school teacher retired with a lifetime of savings. Within months, that money couldn't buy a loaf of bread. In Zimbabwe, trillion-dollar bills were printed and then abandoned on the streets. In Venezuela, engineers earned less than taxi drivers. Entire economies collapsed. Currencies vanished. But something strange happened. Some people lost everything. Others quietly survived. So here's the real question. No one asks, when money fails, what actually holds value? In this video, we're going to explore 7 assets that historically survived economic collapse across hyperinflation, debt crises, regime changes, and systemic failure. We'll also examine what consistently went to zero, no matter how safe it once seemed. This isn't about fear or predictions, it's about understanding patterns. So you can see risk clearly in a world that's becoming less stable, not more. First, what do we mean by economic collapse? An economic collapse is not a recession, and it's not a stock market crash. It's a breakdown of trust. The currency stops functioning as money. Banks restrict withdrawals. Governments lose fiscal control. Contracts stop being honored in real terms. History shows this pattern repeating, from Weimar Germany to Argentina, from the Soviet Union to modern Venezuela. When collapse begins, the rules of finance quietly change. Money becomes unreliable. Liquidity disappears. And survival shifts from optimization to resilience. Asset number 1, productive land. When currencies fail, land doesn't evaporate. Throughout history, productive land, especially farmland, has been one of the most resilient assets during collapse. Why? Because land produces something essential. Food doesn't care about inflation. Energy doesn't depend on confidence. Shelter doesn't require trust in a central bank. During hyperinflation in 1920s, Germany, urban professionals watched their savings dissolve, while farmers, who could trade food directly, retained real purchasing power. Land is slow, it's illiquid, it's boring. But when systems fail, boring assets tend to survive. Asset number 2, gold. Gold has outlived every monetary system ever created. Empires rose, empires fell. Paper currencies were reset, replaced, and erased. Gold remained. During hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, gold functioned as an informal store of value when the national currency became unusable. In Argentina, it historically acted as a hedge against repeated currency devaluations. Gold doesn't generate income. It doesn't innovate. It doesn't grow. But it also doesn't default. Its value doesn't come from trust in a government. It comes from scarcity, durability, and history. That's why central banks still hold it. Asset number 3, skills and human capital. This is the asset most people underestimate. When economies collapse, institutions lose power. Degrees matter less. Titles lose meaning. Formal employment becomes unstable. But skills don't vanish. Doctors, electricians, mechanics, engineers, farmers, technicians, people who can do things, remain in demand. In Argentina's repeated debt crises, individuals with exportable skills or international income streams consistently fared better than those tied to local wages. Skills are portable. They adapt across borders. They can't be inflated away. In many collapses, human capital became the real currency. Asset number 4, foreign currency and external access. When collapse begins, local currency is usually the first casualty. People don't wait for official announcements. They quietly move toward alternatives. US dollars, euros, Swiss francs. In Venezuela, dollarization happened informally years before it became semi-official. In Eastern Europe, after the Soviet collapse, foreign cash often functioned as parallel money. The key insight isn't speculation, it's access. Those with external accounts, foreign income, or remittance channels were insulated. Not immune, but protected. Collapse punishes isolation. It rewards optionality. Asset number 5, essential businesses. Not all businesses die during collapse. Speculative companies disappear first. Luxury fades quickly, but essential services persist. Food distribution, basic health care, energy, repairs, transportation. During the Great Depression, while many firms collapsed, companies tied to necessities continued operating, often with thinner margins but steady demand. When people can't afford everything, they prioritize survival. Utility beats innovation during collapse. Asset number 6, social capital and trust networks. This asset never appears on balance sheets, but history shows it matters deeply. In collapsing systems, formal markets weaken, informal networks strengthen, family support systems, community trade, trusted relationships. In post-Soviet economies, barter systems replaced cash markets. Those with strong social ties had access to food, work, and protection. Those without were exposed. When institutions fail, people revert to something older than money: trust. Asset number 7, scarce, decentralized digital assets. This is the newest category and the most debated. In recent collapses, decentralized digital assets like Bitcoin played a mixed but notable role. They offered portability, censorship resistance, external liquidity. In countries with capital controls, they allowed individuals to move value across borders when banks restricted withdrawals. They were volatile. They were imperfect. But unlike local currencies, they couldn't be printed, frozen, or forcibly redenominated by collapsing governments. This doesn't make them invincible, but it places them in a historically unique category: assets not tied to any single nation-state. What consistently went to zero. Now let's talk about what failed. Again and again. Local currency savings. Savings held entirely in collapsing currencies were often destroyed. In Weimar Germany, middle-class savings evaporated within months. In Zimbabwe, trillion-dollar notes became souvenirs. Currency is trust. Once trust breaks, recovery is rare. Fixed income promises, pensions, government bonds, guaranteed yields. These rely on future stability. When governments lose control, inflation becomes the silent default. The promise remains on paper. The value disappears in reality. Highly leveraged assets. Debt magnifies collapse. Real estate purchased with heavy leverage. Businesses dependent on constant credit. When liquidity disappears, leverage turns from accelerator to anchor. Pure speculation. Assets with no utility, no cash flow, and no underlying demand collapse first. Speculation thrives on confidence. Collapse destroys confidence. Economic collapse isn't random. It follows patterns. Currencies fail first. Trust follows. Institutions crumble last. But value doesn't disappear. It moves. It moves toward productivity, scarcity, utility, systems outside centralized failure. The biggest mistake people make is assuming collapse wipes everything out equally. It doesn't. It punishes fragility, and it rewards resilience. History doesn't repeat perfectly, but it rhymes with unsettling consistency. If this perspective helped you see risk more clearly and think more deeply about resilience, consider subscribing for more calm, long-form stories about money, power, and the systems shaping our world. This is Cold Insight. Thanks for listening.